Sophia Blackwell hadn't touched food in 72 hours, and her billionaire father was watching his only child fade away before his eyes. The 17-year-old sat motionless at the grand mahogany dining table, her pale hands folded in her lap, staring at the untouched plate of gourmet salmon that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Marcus Blackwell, worth $43 billion, could buy anything in the world except the one thing he desperately needed, his daughter's will to live. Before we continue, if you enjoy stories about unexpected human connections that change everything, make sure to click that subscribe button. This is the best way for you to support our work. Thank you very much, and let's continue. The Blackwell mansion stood like a fortress of glass and steel against the Seattle skyline, its 47 rooms echoing with the hollow sound of wealth that couldn't purchase happiness. Marcus had already fired 6 chefs in the past month, each one more renowned than the last. Celebrity chefs from Michelin-starred restaurants, nutritionists with degrees from Harvard, even a specialist in eating disorders flown in from Switzerland. Nothing worked. Sophia would sit, stare, and silently reject every meal placed before her. The girl who once laughed through family dinners had become a ghost haunting her own life. Her thick auburn hair, once vibrant and full, now hung limp around her gaunt face. Her emerald eyes, so much like her late mother's, had lost their spark 3 months ago when the accident happened. The private jet crash that claimed Isabella Blackwell's life had taken something vital from Sophia, too. Something that couldn't be replaced with all the money in the world. Dr. Patricia Henman, the family's longtime physician, had been clear during her last visit. Mr. Blackwell, if Sophia doesn't start eating soon, we'll need to consider hospitalization and feeding tubes. Her body is consuming itself. The words had hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd built an empire from nothing, conquered markets, and commanded respect from world leaders, but he was powerless to save his own daughter. That's when Elena Vasquez arrived. Elena wasn't like the other chefs. She didn't come with awards or accolades, didn't speak of molecular gastronomy or fusion techniques. She was 28, with warm, honey-colored skin, dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and eyes that seemed to see straight through pretense to the heart of things. She'd grown up in a small village in Colombia, learned to cook from her grandmother, and had been working as a line cook in a modest family restaurant in Portland when Marcus's assistant found her. The interview had been brief. Marcus, desperate and running out of options, barely looked up from his laptop when Elena entered his study. "Can you make my daughter eat?" he asked bluntly, his voice rough with exhaustion. Elena studied him for a long moment. "I can't make anyone do anything, Mr. Blackwell, but I can cook with love. Sometimes that's enough." It wasn't the answer he expected, but something in her quiet confidence made him nod. "You start tomorrow." Elena's first morning in the Blackwell kitchen was a revelation. The space was magnificent, equipped with every conceivable appliance, stocked with ingredients that cost more per pound than most people spent on groceries in a month. But it felt cold, sterile, like a showroom rather than a place where meals were prepared with care. She spent her first hour not cooking, but exploring. She opened every cabinet, examined every spice, ran her fingers along the marble countertops that had never known the warm chaos of a family meal. Then she did something that would have scandalized the previous chefs. She stripped the kitchen down to its essentials. The molecular gastronomy equipment went into storage. The exotic ingredients were set aside. Elena filled the counter with simple things: flour, eggs, butter, onions, garlic, tomatoes. Ingredients that told stories, that carried the memory of countless meals shared in love. When lunchtime came, she didn't prepare the elaborate presentation that Sophia had been refusing. Instead, she made something different. She walked to Sophia's room, knocked gently, and waited. "I'm not hungry," came the whispered response from behind the door. "I know," Elena replied softly. "I didn't come to make you eat. I came to tell you about my grandmother." There was silence, then the soft sound of footsteps. The door opened a crack, revealing one emerald eye peering out suspiciously. Elena smiled. "She taught me that food isn't about hunger, it's about memory, about love, about the stories we tell when we share a meal." She held up a simple white bowl. "This is her story. Would you like to hear it?" Sophia opened the door wider, curiosity flickering in her eyes. For the first time in weeks, Elena didn't push, didn't try to hand her the bowl. She simply sat on the floor outside Sophia's room, the bowl beside her, and began to speak. "My grandmother, Esperanza, lived through things that would have broken most people. She lost her husband in the war, raised 7 children. Alone, watched some of them leave for other countries and never return. But every morning she would wake before dawn and make arepa. Not because she was hungry, but because the smell would wake the house, and for a few minutes we were all together." Elena lifted the bowl, breathing in the steam that rose from it. "This isn't arepa, but it carries the same love. Chicken soup, but not like the ones your other chefs made. This one remembers being made in a kitchen where children laughed, where mistakes were forgiven, where every ingredient was chosen with care. Sophia had moved closer without realizing it, drawn by Elena's voice, by the story that seemed to wrap around her like a warm blanket. "Why are you telling me this?" Elena looked at her directly, no pity in her eyes, just understanding. "Because I think you're hungry for more than food. I think you're hungry for the feeling of being connected to something, of belonging somewhere. Your mother's gone, and that's broken something inside you, but she wouldn't want you to disappear, too." Tears began to fall down Sophia's cheeks, the first she'd shed since the funeral. Elena reached out slowly, offering the bowl. "You don't have to eat it all. Just taste it. Not for me, not for your father. For the part of you that remembers what it felt like to be loved." Sophia's hands trembled as she took the bowl. The soup was simple, nothing fancy, but it tasted like comfort, like the idea of home. She took one small sip, then another. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. Over the following days, Elena didn't try to force regular meals. Instead, she created rituals. Every morning, she would make coffee in the kitchen and invite Sophia to join her, not to eat, but to talk. She told stories about her grandmother, about growing up in a house where love was measured in the time it took to prepare a meal, where arguments were forgotten over shared dessert. Sophia found herself drawn to these morning conversations. Elena never asked about her mother directly, never pushed her to open up about the accident. She simply created a space where Sophia felt safe to exist, where she didn't have to perform or pretend to be okay. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after Elena's arrival. Sophia appeared in the kitchen earlier than usual, her eyes puffy from crying, her hands shaking. "I dreamed about her last night," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "About Mom. We were in our old kitchen, the one we had before Dad got rich, before everything changed. She was teaching me to make pancakes, and I could smell vanilla and cinnamon, and she was laughing because I kept dropping the batter on the dough's floor." Elena nodded, understanding immediately. She moved to the refrigerator, pulling out eggs, milk, flour. "What kind of pancakes were they?" "Blueberry," Sophia said, a small smile ghosting across her lips. She always said the secret was in the mixing. Not too much, or they'd be tough. Just enough to bring everything together. "Would you like to make them now? For her?" Sophia hesitated, then nodded. Elena guided her through the process, their hands working together to create something simple and perfect. The kitchen filled with the scent of vanilla and cinnamon, of blueberries bursting in the heat, of memory made manifest. When the first pancake was ready, Sophia took a small bite. Then another. The tears came again, but they were different now, cleaner somehow. "She would have loved you," she told Elena. "Mom always said that the best cooks don't just feed the body, they feed the soul." That afternoon, Marcus found them in the kitchen together, Sophia actually laughing as Elena taught her to knead bread dough. He stood in the doorway, barely breathing, afraid that any movement might shatter this precious moment. His daughter looked more alive than she had in months. Elena noticed him first. "Mr. Blackwell," she said quietly, "would you like to join us? We're making your daughter's favorite bread." Marcus stepped forward hesitantly. "I don't know how to cook." Sophia looked up at him, flour dusting her cheeks. "Elena says cooking isn't about knowing how, it's about being willing to try." For the next hour, the three of them worked together in the kitchen. Marcus, who commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals, found himself completely out of his element and strangely at peace. Sophia guided his large hands as he attempted to braid the dough, her voice growing stronger with each correction she offered. The bread that emerged from the oven was imperfect, one side slightly higher than the other, the braid uneven in places. But when they sat at the small kitchen table to taste it, sharing butter and jam, Marcus realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd seen Sophia eat with such genuine pleasure. "This is better than any of the fancy restaurants," she said, taking another bite. "It tastes like us." Elena smiled, watching father and daughter connect over something as simple as warm bread. The best meals always do. As weeks passed, Sophia's recovery wasn't linear. There were still difficult days, mornings when she couldn't bring herself to leave her room, afternoons when grief overwhelmed her so completely that eating seemed impossible. But Elena remained constant, never pushing, never demanding, simply present. She introduced Sophia to cooking traditions from around the world, each dish carrying its own story of resilience, of people who had faced loss and found ways to continue. They made dumplings while Elena talked about Chinese families who gathered every new year to fold hundreds together, sharing news and gossip over the repetitive comfort of the task. They prepared curry while learning about Indian mothers who passed down spice combinations like family heirlooms, each blend telling the story of a lineage. Sophia began to understand that food was a language, one that spoke of connection across cultures and generations. Every meal Elena taught her carried the wisdom of survival, the knowledge that humans had always gathered around tables to share not just sustenance, but hope. Marcus watched his daughter's gradual transformation with a mixture of relief and wonder. The girl who had retreated into silence was slowly becoming someone new, still carrying her grief but no longer consumed by it. She started joining him for dinner again, not the formal affairs they'd shared in the past, but simple meals in the kitchen, where conversation flowed as naturally as wine. One evening, as they sat around the kitchen table sharing a pot of Elena's grandmother's stew, Sophia looked at her father with eyes that seemed older, wiser. "I know you blame yourself for what happened to Mom," she said quietly. "For the business trip, for her being on that plane." Marcus's fork paused halfway to his mouth. They'd never spoken directly about the accident, about the guilt that ate at him every day. "But she chose to go," Sophia continued. "She wanted to surprise you for your anniversary. She was happy, Dad. In those last few weeks, she kept talking about how excited she was, how she couldn't wait to see your face when she showed up unexpectedly." Tears began to fall down Marcus's cheeks, the first he'd allowed himself since the funeral. "I should have been there, should have insisted she take the company jet, not that charter. And then maybe we'd both be gone, and I'd be alone." Sophia reached across the table, taking her father's hand. "Elena taught me that we can't change what happened, but we can choose what it means going forward. Mom wouldn't want us to stop living because she can't." Elena, who had been quietly cleaning dishes, felt her own eyes fill with tears. This was what she'd hoped for, not just Sophia's physical recovery, but the healing of a family that had been torn apart by tragedy. The real test came when Marcus announced he had to travel for business, the first trip he'd planned since Isabella's death. Sophia's old anxiety returned immediately, the fear of loss manifesting as a refusal to eat breakfast that morning. Elena found her sitting on her bedroom floor, knees drawn to her chest. "He's going to die too," Sophia whispered. "Everyone I love dies." "Maybe," Elena said gently, sitting beside her. "That's the terrible truth about loving people. We will all die eventually, but look at what you're doing right now. You're so afraid of losing your father that you're choosing not to live while he's still here." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. It showed a young woman with Elena's eyes, standing in a modest kitchen surrounded by children of various ages. "This is my grandmother at 40, 5 years after my grandfather died. She could have stopped cooking, stopped caring for her family, stopped trying. But she chose to keep living, to keep loving, even knowing it would hurt when she lost people." Sophia looked at the photograph, then at Elena. "Does it get easier?" "No," Elena said honestly. "But it gets different. The love doesn't go away when someone dies. It changes form, becomes something you carry instead of something you share. But it's still love." That afternoon, when Marcus's car pulled up to take him to the airport, Sophia walked him to the door. She hugged him tightly, breathing in his familiar cologne, memorizing the feel of his arms around her. "Come back to me," she whispered. "Always," he promised. "And while I'm gone, take care of Elena. She's family now." The 3 days Marcus was away became a turning point for Sophia and Elena's relationship. Without the buffer of her father's presence, Sophia was forced to confront her own strength, to realize that she could function, could even find joy in his absence. Elena taught her to make pasta from scratch, their hands working the dough until it was silky and smooth. They prepared elaborate meals they would freeze for Marcus's return, planning a welcome-home feast that would fill the house with the sense of love and celebration. On the second night, as they sat eating bowls of homemade ramen while rain drummed, against the windows, Sophia asked the question she'd been carrying for weeks. "Why did you really come here, Elena? You could work anywhere, for anyone. Why us?" Elena was quiet for a long moment, twirling noodles around her chopsticks. "Because I know what it's like to lose a mother," she said finally. "I was 16 when mine died. Cancer. And for a long time after, I thought food was the enemy, because how could anything taste good when she was gone?" She took a sip of broth, her eyes distant with memory. "My grandmother saved me. The same way I hope I'm helping save you. She taught me that cooking for others is how we show love when words aren't enough. Every meal I make carries a little bit of everyone who taught me, everyone I've loved." Sophia felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of the tight knot of grief she'd carried for months. "So when you cook for me, you're cooking with your mother's love too?" "And my grandmother's, and all the women who came before her. Love doesn't die, Sophia. It just gets passed down in different forms. Sometimes in recipes, sometimes in the way we touch someone's shoulder when they're crying, sometimes in the simple act of showing up when someone needs us." When Marcus returned home, he found his house transformed. The formal dining room, unused for months, was set with candles and simple dishes that somehow seemed more elegant than all the crystal and china they'd stored away. Sophia greeted him at the door, her face bright with excitement, flour still dusting her apron. "Welcome home. Dad, we made you a feast." The meal that followed was unlike anything the Blackwell family had shared before. Instead of carefully orchestrated courses served by staff, Elena had taught Sophia to create a celebration of simple abundance. There was fresh bread, still warm, from the oven, pasta with sauce made from tomatoes they'd roasted themselves, a salad with herbs grown in the kitchen garden Elena had started on the windowsill. But more than the food, it was the conversation that marked the true change. Sophia talked animatedly about everything she'd learned, about the difference between Italian and Asian approaches to noodles, about how bread rises differently depending on the weather, about the way Elena's grandmother had survived revolution and heartbreak by feeding her family. Marcus listened with wonder, realizing that his daughter hadn't just started eating again. She'd started living. The hollow-eyed ghost who had haunted their house for months was gone, replaced by a young woman who spoke with passion, who laughed freely, who seemed to glow with newfound purpose. As they cleared the dishes together, Marcus pulled Elena aside. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've given me my daughter back." Elena smiled, but her expression was serious. "I didn't give her back, Mr. Blackwell. She was always there. She just needed to remember who she was underneath all that pain." "Whatever you want," Marcus said. "Name your price, a restaurant of your own, seed money for any business venture, anything." Elena shook her head. "I don't need anything from you except the promise that you'll keep cooking with her. What we've built here, this connection, it only works if it continues. Don't go back to hiring staff to make her meals. Keep making them together." It was 6 months later that the real test came. Sophia's 18th birthday arrived with all the weight of tradition that came with being a Blackwell. Marcus had planned a lavish party, hundreds of guests, a ballroom rented at the city's most exclusive hotel. But the morning of the celebration, Sophia came to him with a different request. "I want to cook," she said, "for everyone. Elena and I have been planning a menu for weeks. Nothing fancy, just food that tells our story." Marcus hesitated. "Sweetheart, there will be senators there, business partners, people who expect what?" Sophia interrupted gently. "Perfect presentation over genuine hospitality? Dad, I've spent the last 6 months learning that the most important thing we can offer people isn't wealth or status. It's nourishment. Real nourishment." The party that evening was unlike any social event Seattle's elite had ever attended. Instead of a formal ballroom, Marcus opened their home, transforming the main floor into a warm, welcoming space where guests could move freely between rooms. The kitchen became the heart of the celebration, with Elena and Sophia working side by side to prepare dishes that told the story of resilience, of cultures meeting and finding common ground, of love expressed through the simple act of feeding others. Sophia greeted each guest personally, not with the polished manners she'd been taught, but with genuine warmth, sharing the stories behind each dish, explaining how Elena had taught her that every recipe carried the wisdom of the people who created it. The mayor's wife, expecting catered elegance, found herself rolling dough for empanadas, while Sophia explained how her grandmother's technique differed from Elena's. A prominent businessman discovered he had a talent for seasoning soup after Elena guided him through adjusting salt and pepper by taste rather than measurement. As the evening progressed, something magical happened. The formal boundaries that usually defined such gatherings dissolved. Powerful men who normally spoke only of deals and mergers found themselves sharing childhood memories triggered by familiar flavors. Women who had spent years perfecting social masks relaxed into genuine conversation as they worked together in the kitchen. Marcus stood in the doorway, watching his daughter command the room, not through wealth or status, but through the simple act of sharing food made with love. She moved with confidence, her face bright with purpose, completely transformed from the girl who had refused to eat just months before. Elena appeared beside him, wiping her hands on her apron. "She's remarkable," she said softly. "She learned. From the best," Marcus replied. "I'll never be able to repay what you've done for us." "You already have," Elena said, nodding toward Sophia. "You let me be part of your family. You let me watch her grow into who she was meant to be." As the party wound down and the last guest departed with containers of leftover soup and warm rolls, Sophia collapsed into a kitchen chair, exhausted, but glowing with satisfaction. "I think Mom would have loved tonight," she said, her voice soft with contentment rather than sadness. Marcus sat beside her, reaching for her hand. "I know she would have. She always said the best parties were the ones where people left feeling more connected than when they arrived." Elena began the familiar ritual of cleaning up, but Sophia stopped her. "Leave it. We'll do it together tomorrow. Tonight. Just sit with us." They sat in comfortable silence, the three of them around the kitchen table that had become the center of their rebuilt world. The formal dining room remained empty, its polished perfection unable to compete with the warmth of this simple space where they had learned to be a family again. 6 months later, Sophia made an announcement that surprised no one who knew her story. She was deferring college for a year to attend culinary school, not because she wanted to become a chef, but because she wanted to understand food as a language of connection, of healing, of love. "I want to learn how to help other people the way Elena helped me," she told her father over breakfast. "I want to understand how sharing a meal can save a life." Marcus, who had once seen cooking as a service to be purchased, now understood it as an art form, a way of caring for others that transcended mere sustenance. He not only supported Sophia's decision, but found himself enrolling in weekend cooking classes, determined to continue the journey they had started together. Elena remained with the family, no longer as hired help, but as chosen family. She had become the keeper of their new traditions, the teacher who continued to show them that the most profound connections happen not in boardrooms or ballrooms, but around tables, where people share not just food, but stories, laughter, and the vulnerable act of nourishing one another. On the first anniversary of Isabella's death, instead of a somber memorial, they gathered in the kitchen to prepare her favorite meal. They cooked with tears and laughter, sharing memories while their hands worked to create something beautiful from simple ingredients. When they sat down to eat, Sophia raised her glass in a toast. To Mom, who taught me that love is the most important ingredient in everything we do, and to Elena, who reminded me how to taste it again. As they shared that meal, surrounded by the warmth of their rebuilt family, it was clear that sometimes the most profound healing comes not from medicine or therapy, but from the simple, revolutionary act of one person cooking for another with complete and unconditional love. Elena hadn't just saved Sophia's life, she had shown a broken family how to become whole again, one shared meal at a time.